5 minutes northeast of the University of Georgia, past the bustling of downtown, exists a largely unknown historic site, the Gospel Pilgrim Cemetery. Officially established in 1882 by a local lodge called the Gospel Pilgrim Society, this 10-acre plot of land adjacent to the Springfield Baptist Church holds rich Clark County history. The cemetery came to be during the years of Reconstruction following the Civil War to serve as the final resting place to those who either could not afford or were not allowed to be buried in other public cemeteries, which was really just a way to discriminate against African Americans even after they had passed. The Gospel Pilgrim Society offset the cost of funeral services and burials because many African Americans at the time did not have the money to afford a proper funeral. The earliest marked graves date back to 1885, with many of the first headstones being only a large rock protruding halfway out of the ground. It was continually used from its establishment up into the 2000s, with the last recorded burial taking place in 2003. During its tenure as an active burial ground, a few notable historic figures from the Athens area were buried here, including Madison Davis, Munner B. Morton, and Harriet Powers. Davis and Powers were both former slaves who broke down the barriers holding them back as Davis became a state legislator against much oppression, and Powers worked as a folk artist, gaining national recognition for illustrating her talents and her heritage. Morton was the son of a former mixed slave and a white man, making him a quarter black. Although it would have been very easy for him to hide this, he decided to put that side of him on display, becoming heavily involved with black politics and business, even constructing the Morton Building, which housed offices for African American doctors and pharmacists, and is also where the Morton Theater is located today. It is one thing to search information about a historic site, but to walk among the structure and immerse oneself into the atmosphere, that is an entirely different experience. The cemetery is right next to a road, but once you track back into the trees, you have entered a different world. It is a quiet place, void of any life, and very sad. This place is extremely morbid, even for cemetery standards. Although restoration efforts that provided pathways and markers to guide visitors were completed in 2008, no amount of cleanup short of a demolition would clear this place out. The one thing every place in this cemetery has in common is the overwhelming mass of vines and bushes, making it impossible to get within 10 feet of the headstones without the aid of a machete. But maybe this thicket is a defense, a way of keeping people who look like me away, because people who looked like me 140 years ago forced this place into being. I feel like a trespasser, disturbing the peace, but if I ignore this place instead, I would still be offending the residents. Aside from the invading plants, the graves are decorated with fallen and cracked headstones, whether naturally or by force is not quite clear. Beautiful wreaths of human trash, makeshift headstones from pieces of metal that looked like discarded license plates, and inscriptions reading something like, aged about 50 when they died, emphasizing the neglect people of color were given. This OCD nightmare is definitely not the fate that these people deserved. However, some have been saved, as many graves show signs that their previous contents have been exhumed. But this makes the scene even more somber, because these souls still could not find relief until they were removed from the location completely. Because it is better to acknowledge history and learn from it, I feel as though we should all walk through places like the Gospel Pilgrim Cemetery and soak everything in, even if we feel our presence isn't initially welcome. Declaring this place a historic site raises the right kind of awareness for it, and is the first of many great steps that will deepen appreciation for the differences we have. And I believe that appreciation will bring us closer together. The cleanup of the Gospel Pilgrim Cemetery was well deserved, and hopefully in the near future, the area will be thoroughly cleaned and polished to show off the history stored within.